I drove myself to the hospital in labor, after my in-laws chose lunch with SIL's boyfriend, weeks later. We threw them out when they brought gifts. I, a 27-year-old woman, had a kid with my 28-year-old husband Oliver last week. We dated for 3 years and married 2 years ago. I've known his family for the last 5 years. And because my parents reside out of state and my father has a number of medical issues, they were meant to drive me to the hospital if my husband was not present. We'd already discussed it. They'd agreed to it. And considering our friendship, I had no reason to believe they wouldn't show up. We had a rather regular relationship, but I'm not sure what occurred. When I went into labor last week, my spouse was not available. It was approximately 3 weeks before my due date. So, to be fair, I don't blame him because we weren't anticipating it. When my water broke, I tried calling him, but it went directly to voicemail. Later, he informed me that he was in a critical customer meeting at a location with really bad reception. But nonetheless, we had planned for it. So when I realized he wouldn't be able to pick up my calls anytime soon, I called my in-laws. When I contacted them, they didn't answer for the first several times, but I kept calling until my mother-in-law did. She sounded irritated, but I explained my position and stated I wanted to get to the hospital right now. Instead of alerting me that they would be here, they informed me that I needed to wait until the contractions were closer together before they arrived. They were busy right now because they were meeting my sister-in-law's boyfriend for the first time, and they couldn't just go. For context, my sister-in-law Sarah, 23F, has only been with this guy for 6 months. And I'm sure they could join him for lunch later. And excuse me if I seem pompous, but I believe that going into labor was a larger event than meeting him. I attempted to explain that I didn't want to wait, but they said it was fine. The baby could wait, and all they needed to do was eat their lunch before coming here. At the time, they had just placed their order, so it was obviously going to take a lot longer for them to acquire their dinner, eat it, and drive to my place. Add in the time it would take them to drive me from my house to the hospital. I did the arithmetic and determined I just couldn't afford to rely on them, so I tried calling my husband a couple more times, but when he did not answer, I decided to drive myself to the hospital instead. The contractions were still manageable, so I was able to make it before they worsened. Once I was logged in, I basically waited for someone to call me back. And approximately 2 hours later, my hubby called me back. I told him everything, even my in-laws' refusal to turn up, and he promised to be there. Within another 2 hours he was by my side, and I was well into labor, so I had no time to think about my in-laws or anyone else. I had the baby several hours later, and we were too excited to talk about his parents. In any case, my in-laws never showed up. They called my husband 2 days later to see whether everything went well with the delivery, making excuses about how they had forgotten because they were so preoccupied with lunch. I don't see how somebody can simply forget about the birth of their grandchild, but whatever. Oliver had been waiting for that phone call, and when they called, they really got it from him. He informed them that they were irresponsible and self-centered, and that he never expected them to act like way. But now that it had happened, they could say goodbye to all hopes of having a relationship with their grandson. Because the only grandchild they would have anything to do with was Sarah's child whenever she had one, and it hasn't happened in quite some time. Then he blocked them, and within a few minutes, I began receiving texts from my in-laws and Sarah, telling me that I shouldn't have snitched for no reason. They're saying I overreacted and that this wasn't a big problem because nothing actually happened, so I responded to them, explaining that it was not the point at all. The key was that they'd made a commitment, and at the last minute, they really disappointed me by failing to show up. Even after that, they refused to apologize and continued to act as if everything was fine. Besides, this was serious. This concerned the birth of my child, and I was not going to forgive them for it. I informed them that my husband had spoken exactly how I felt, and that they did not deserve to be around their grandchild if they did not respect their grandchild's mother. But they continue to argue that we are overreacting. Even if I disagree, I wanted to ensure that we were on the right track here. So, am I the bad guy for not letting my in-laws to visit their grandchild after they refused to help me? Update 1. Thank you for all your remarks. It means a lot to me. Oliver and I discussed anything we were informed, and we decided to stick to our decision. They do not deserve to be around my baby, period. They refused to aid me when I needed it. They can't really expect me to forget about that so quickly. Especially because they have not even apologized or shown me that they are sorry for what they have done. So how can I forgive those who don't even apologize? I cannot. And frankly, I don't want to. I was already 80% persuaded that we were not in the wrong here, but reading the comments made me realize how wrong they were in doing what they did. Now that I think about it, I don't understand how they could be so callous. It wasn't like we'd ever had a poor relationship, so I have no idea where this came from. Even Oliver is confused. We don't know why this happened, but the fact is that it happened. I blocked them all as well, and they now have no means to contact us. It's a good thing, because we're both quite busy with our child right now. Newborns can be rather difficult to manage. And honestly, we don't have time for this kind of drama. It is meaningless. It's not going to lead somewhere. As a result, we choose not to participate. If they want to keep attempting to contact us and guilt-tripping us, that is perfectly fine, but they are absolutely delusional if they expect us to reply at any time. So far they have not tried again, but it has only been a few days since we blocked them. So, I'm confident that if you give it some time, they'll try harder, because I know they're all extremely interested in keeping the family together. So they won't be able to take it if we cut them off permanently. But that is exactly what is happening. And whether they can accept that or not is really none of our business. I expected Oliver to be much more sad that his parents will not be able to join us right now, but to be honest, I don't think he cares about anything other than the baby right now. So that's a tremendous relief, since I didn't want to be caught up in some bizarre family drama. Anyway, speaking of family, my parents are flying down to meet us in the coming days. And I'm crossing my fingers that whatever my in-laws try, they just wait it out until my parents arrive, since I don't want them to bother my father. He already faces numerous health issues. This is the last thing he needs when he comes over to meet his grandchildren, so I hope they stay away. Update 2. So my folks are finally here. They arrived last evening and will be staying with us for the next few days. And I'm grateful for it since I could use an additional set of hands with my infant. I'm now on maternity leave, but my husband still works from home, so he can't help as much as he would want. So my mother is helping me out. And, happily, any drama my in-laws have planned for the time being will be limited to online channels. So my father is not getting into problems. For those who are wondering, he has numerous heart problems. It's been an issue for a few years, and we don't want to stress him out. And it's really easy to stress him out, especially when it involves me. We haven't even told them about the whole problem with my in-laws, because I know my father will be upset if he finds out how they refused to transport me to the hospital. And, as I previously stated, we don't want him to sweat this. So for the next few days, and as long as he is here, we will not discuss any of it. However, this does not mean that my in-laws have stopped causing trouble. They're still going strong. As I already stated, they are limited themselves to online means. They've set up a bunch of burner profiles on social media and are using them to contact us, tell us how we're making a mistake, and say that they had their reasons for staying at the lunch instead of driving me to the hospital, and that I shouldn't hold that against them because, at the end of the day, they didn't do anything bad to their grandchild. I don't see why people can't see that it's not about them doing something wrong. It is about them failing to follow through on their commitments. They had been incredibly insensitive and selfish, and whatever their motives were, I didn't care since this was important to me, and it should have been to them as well if they cared so much about their granddaughter. They appear to want to care about their grandchild right now, given that he is in this world. But they couldn't care less about how he got into it, or who brought him in. They had promised to be there for me if my husband was unavailable when I went into labor. And they had every opportunity to support me, but they chose not to, which is unacceptable. So Oliver and I don't care what the motives are for any of this. It simply doesn't matter. There is no reason to excuse this, and I will keep them away from my family for as long as necessary. If that makes me the bad guy or someone who overreacts, that's fine. But right now, I realize I don't need them around. Oliver doesn't want them around, and neither do my parents. I'm just glad they haven't asked about it yet. But if they do, I'll just make something up. Anyway, I'm pleased they're not turning up in person because that's the last thing I want. I believe Oliver and I already have enough on our plates without them adding to it. Update 3. Okay, my parents were here for a week, but they had to fly back yesterday because they have their own jobs and lives. But it was great to have them here, even if only for a week. They said they will try to visit again before the end of the month. So I'm looking forward to that. It was lovely to have my mother assist me. But now that she's gone, Oliver has assured me that he'll attempt to reduce his workload to assist me out. Fortunately, we have been quite cautious with our money over the last couple of years, so we can afford to be a little more relaxed right now. Everything is going nicely for us. His family has not contacted us in a while. They originally attempted to contact us, as I had stated, but over the last few days, I believe they caught the hint and decided to leave us alone. And, as I had feared, my parents inquired about my in-laws and why they were not visiting, as they had found it very perplexing. I debated telling my father the truth, but in the end, I simply told him that they were currently on vacation and would return later. He thought it was unusual, but he didn't question it, so we got off easy. But when I told my mother the same thing, she saw right through my falsehoods and informed me that she knew something had happened, which was why they weren't coming over. Because they are constantly preaching about family and family values and keeping everyone together, she found it difficult to understand that folks like that would choose to stay on vacation rather than return home to see their grandchildren. Of course, there was no hiding it from her. So I told her the truth. She was as astonished as I had been, and she said I made the right decision not to tell my father since he would have freaked out and given my in-laws a piece of his mind. And that would have made him even more stressed. So it was probably best not to offer him any reason at all. Regarding our reaction to the entire situation, she told us that we had done everything correctly. She told me that if she had had the same opportunities as they did, she would have made sure to be there for her daughter-in-law's delivery, especially because we had expressly requested that they be there for us. And they had agreed on it. Regardless, they couldn't be bothered to show there just because they were having lunch with Sarah's boyfriend, as if it was more important than anything else in the world. It was only a lunch. They might have simply excused themselves and came to my rescue, but I was obviously not a priority for them. My mother was truly unhappy that she couldn't have been there for me. But I assured her it was fine since I realized she needed to care for my father and that they couldn't fly out here, especially since they didn't know when my due date was. They planned to come over around my due date. Unfortunately, I had given birth earlier, therefore it was not possible for them. And I do not blame them at all. This is simply how life works. However, that was not the same for my in-laws. They had a chance, but they blew it, and now they will have to face the consequences. I was feeling a little strange about not giving them an opportunity to explain, because they kept repeating in their texts that they had valid reasons. But it was my mother who taught me that I didn't have to feel guilty about anything. Because at the end of the day, they had not been there for me. And that was all. That was everything I needed to know. She was the one who told me that it didn't matter what the reasons were, because we were already very convinced they couldn't have been severe, because we would have known otherwise. And if they weren't serious, they were certainly not excuses. It was that simple, so that's what I'm going to go by, and I'm certainly not engaging with them right now. Update 4. Okay, it's been 2 weeks, and we've pretty much forgotten about the whole issue with my in-laws. We were entirely focused on our youngster during this new lifestyle. So we didn't have much time to sit and think about them. We had practically forgotten about it until they showed up today. Around 9 a.m., practically in the middle of breakfast, they began ringing the doorbell incessantly, and when we checked, it was the 3 of them standing there with a pile of gifts, bouquets and balloons. I'm not sure what they were expecting. They undoubtedly assumed that if they showed up with their gifts and whatnot, we'd melt and let them in. But I remembered everything, as did Oliver. So we answered the door and informed them we didn't need any of this and would be grateful if they left us alone. They squandered an opportunity to help and be courteous to us. So we didn't need all of this pretense. And for some reason, his mother began speaking to me in the same way that adults speak to small children, cajoling and such. She informed me that she realized I was upset and that I had every right to be, but they were only human, and everyone makes errors. So they were permitted one error, and we had already wasted a lot of time arguing with each other. So it was preferable for us to simply attempt to move on from whatever had occurred, because it was what would be best for their grandchild in the long run. Her tone was dismissive, and I honestly didn't know what to say because I was so astonished. Nobody had ever spoken to me in that way, as if I were 5 years old and needed to be treated like a kid. So Oliver told her to stop it since we weren't at daycare and she wasn't my babysitter. So she didn't have to speak to me in that tone because it was just odd. He also told her that whatever was best for our baby, we were better suited to make that decision as parents. They had lost the right to call themselves grandparents when they refused to drive me to the hospital. So, all of this was meaningless. And his parents began bickering with him, claiming that we were going too far now and that it had already been a few weeks, so we should have forgiven them and moved on. But plainly, we just wanted to drag it out and make them feel as if they had committed a sin or something, when in truth, it wasn't that serious. They claimed that we were not only overreacting, but also not being respectful of our son, because intentionally depriving a child of their grandparents' and aunt's love for no reason other than spite is extremely petty behavior. That's when I snapped, telling them that we don't even owe them an explanation for that. And I told them that they needed to go, or I'd call the cops on them, and they'd be sorry for everything. I also informed them that my child would not be denied anyone's love. Our love and affection were going to be sufficient for him. They definitely did not value him enough when he was born. We didn't need them to be around any longer. Especially given that they never felt it was necessary to apologize to me. So far, all they've done is accuse me of snitching and overreacting. They were stunned because I was yelling at them. I'm not normally one to yell at people, but I had had it with them and they were really getting on my nerves, as if it wasn't terrible enough that they had neglected to keep their promise to me. They still had the arrogance to keep showing up and making me feel like the bad person. And, seeing how worked up I was, Oliver ordered them to go, or we'd have to contact the cops, which we didn't want to do. Everything became quite loud and heated, and as a result, my baby awoke, prompting me to attend to him in his cot. Fortunately, he was in the living room, not too far away, so I could hear everything that was happening. Oliver's parents and sister attempted to reason with him. Of course, the only way they could conceive of doing that was to make me the bad guy. They stated I was pregnant, therefore I was obviously hormonal and upset, and he should keep his cool in the circumstance and consider things from their perspective as well. They simply did not want to appear rude or disrespectful to Sarah's boyfriend, whom they were meeting for the first time, and that was the only reason they had missed the delivery. And they insisted that subsequently they had simply forgotten about it, as if we were going to buy any of it. You don't simply forget that your daughter-in-law is giving birth, and your first grandchild is about to arrive. And it's quite unusual that all three of them forgot at the same moment. So they omitted that on purpose, and that's the truth. They continued to dispute, and Oliver attempted to drive them away until he took out his phone and announced that he was going to call the cops because he was sick and tired of them. When he did that, they eventually left, scolding him, telling him he was an ungrateful son who would never be forgiven for this. But he didn't care. After they went, he simply made a beeline for me and the baby, and we spent the rest of the afternoon in silence because we had had enough activity for the day. Right now, he's playing with the infant while I type this, and we've discussed what we'll do the next time they show up. We are simply going to contact the cops, since they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt. The only reason we hadn't called the cops immediately away was that we didn't want to cause a disturbance. We reside in a wonderful neighborhood. Cops are not very common here. So we wanted to keep our dignity, but screw it. I'm so over them that I can't bring myself to think about them anymore. I believe I'll be taking a couple of days off from posting here because I truly need a break right now. But I want to thank everyone who has continued to comment and support me. It definitely means a lot to us. Update 5. Hi. So it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and my family and I are doing really well. My mother has returned, along with my father, and will be assisting me for the next week or two. We are also searching for a nanny, as I will be returning to work in a few months. I'm thrilled to have her since she allows me to share everything that has transpired with my in-laws. Oliver is understandably embarrassed by his family's behavior, and does not want to discuss it. They sent us an email a few days ago, possibly last week. Of course they did not apologize, but they did explain why they chose to have lunch instead of coming to me. So supposedly, the guy Sarah is dating is quite wealthy. And I'm talking millionaire rich, as he is the eldest son of a very successful businessman. And they stated this lunch was really important to them because they wanted him to have a positive first impression of them. He and Sarah have been growing serious, and they are considering getting married next year. They've been together for 6 months and aim to marry after 2 years. So of course this was a crucial talk to have, and they couldn't have put it off because if it had been any other guy, they could have simply left in the midst of lunch to come to me. But we were talking about a very wealthy man, so they couldn't help but be quite shallow. I'm not sure why. I think they genuinely thought that this was going to be the explanation we wanted to hear, and we'd forgive them immediately. But, if anything, it made me irritated with them because of all the talk about how essential family is, family values and so on. This definitely does not reflect their way of life. Because if they truly cherished their family, they would have been there for me. They would have been there for their son's partner and their future grandchild. But they chose money. They preferred to impress a guy they had just met over me. So all this discussion about family values is obviously meaningless. They don't really believe in it. They merely utter that rubbish to make themselves look better. Anyway, I don't want to talk about them any longer. I spoke with my father as well. We ultimately told him the truth because he had asked about them, and we couldn't lie to him again. Surprisingly, he was fairly laid back about it, saying that because we had already dealt with them, he didn't see the need to engage with them again. He also informed me that he was really proud of me for standing up for myself and removing harmful people from my life, whether they were family or not. And he appears to be even more fond of my husband than he was before, something I never thought was possible. But I suppose the fact that Oliver stood up to his own family for my sake only makes him more endearing, and I'm delighted to see that my father and his son-in-law are getting along so well. Everyone is happy, everyone is healthy, and this is precisely what I intended from the beginning.